Daniel Pemberton, you just received your very first Emmy nomination for your work on Black Mirror, USS Callister. I'm curious, when you first got this script or first saw a cut of the episode, what were your initial ideas like for the music? What did you think when you first read it or saw it?
I mean, I saw the film when it was actually at a stage where it'd been cut, which is unusual for me because I normally try and come on projects very early while they're still at script stage and get very involved. But with this one, it kind of came on quite late, and so I got to see kind of what the film was already by that point. And I remember just watching, going, "This is absolutely brilliant," and just thinking, "Wow, this is a fantastic." It's like a fantastic episode of Black Mirror because I'm a massive fan of Black Mirror. Anyway, but I also, at that time, I was in the middle of doing Molly's Game for Aaron Sorkin, and I was about to do Ridley Scott's next film, All the Money in the World, and I was just like, I don't have any time, but I'll have a look at it. I watched it. I was like, well, this is brilliant, but it's a shame I can't do it because I'm way too busy. And also, this is the most complicated episode of Black Mirror, or a TV episode I've seen ever. Like, it's the most complicated Black Mirror episode musically, and it's an unbelievably complicated TV episode. So I remember just thinking, well, what a great episode, and I feel really sorry for whatever sucker's going to have to try and like actually score that. So I kind of said I wasn't going to do it, and it just kept in my head. I kept thinking about it, and I was actually out with a friend having dinner. He's like, "What are you talking about? It's a Black Mirror. You've got to do it." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I have. It's really good." So I was just like, "All right, screw it. I'll do it." And then I was on board, and it was really enjoyable. Very hard, but very enjoyable.
What about it specifically made it complicated to you?
There's a number of aspects. One, first of all, you've got like two different scores in an episode anyway. You've got like the conventional, what I'd call a more conventional Black Mirror score, which is like a near future, modern, electronic-esque score. And then you've also got this other aspect, which is incredibly complex, which is a massive orchestral score that has to feel completely right for the period of the main character, Robert Daly's imagining of this world of Space Fleet, which is basically kind of 1960s pulpy sci-fi, like Star Trek, shows like that. And it was important that the music felt as authentic and of that era as possible, because otherwise the whole premise falls apart, because he's built this world which is his loving recreation of this show he's obsessed by. And that's down to everything from the costumes, the set design. And so the music has to feel as authentic and as of that period as everything else. Otherwise, the whole construct of the episode just falls apart because you suddenly have this gaping hole if something doesn't work. So first of all, I was like, you have to have an orchestral score. We have to record this orchestrally. And, you know, that was tricky in a number of ways, just budgetary. You know, it's like a massive, you're scoring a movie on you're basically scoring a feature film on a TV kind of budget. And also the way they wrote then is very different to how people write now. You know, now people write stuff, it's edited like crazy. There's a million people throwing in their opinions. Whereas in those days, people like Bernard Herrmann or Jerry Goldsmith, who were doing those Star Trek episodes, well, they weren't doing Herrmann wasn't, but you know, they would just turn up, here's my score, take it or leave it. And that meant you got a lot more freedom as a composer to just push forwards how you wanted to write the music. Whereas now everything's in flux the whole time. It's a lot harder to do that. But you know, we're now living in the modern world where people expect to be able to fiddle with things the whole time. So you've got to try and write this music. It's kind of boring and technical, but like it's incredibly musical and has a musicality to it, but still get it through the system of modern film composing. And it's also interesting writing something where the emotion was a lot more on the nose those days. Things would be very big, very exciting, very scary, very heroic. And it's embracing that side of writing music, which you know, sometimes you think it's over the top, but also I miss it. You know, I think everyone who loves film music does love stuff which is like, you know, unashamed of emotion. There's a lot of the modern vogue is really to often steer back from emotion musically, and 60 years ago it was just go 100% with the most base emotions, and so it was fun to like try and grab hold of that for this as well.
Right. I mean, I was going to ask you actually, because one of the interesting things that this entire episode does is it has a lot of fun creating this kind of loving homage to the Star Trek sci-fi world. So were there other than Star Trek, I mean, you mentioned like Bernard Herrmann and people like that, were there specific influences that you looked to try to capture that kind of 60s orchestral sound?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of things. I mean, there was things where there was stuff like trying to get a theme which would work all the way through, that kind of had like all kind of like space stuff always starts with a kind of fifth. I wonder if I've got any sounds up here. Give me two. Oh, I don't. Sorry, I'm on a different track. I was about to play something, but I have the right thing loaded up.
Oh, okay.
But they often always have like a big fanfare. Star Trek has a great fanfare. Star Wars, all these shows have the kind of like brass fanfare. So I wanted to come up with a strong theme that we could work all the way through the episode, that you start off the very opening with, and it's referenced to the film, and then by the time you get to the end, it's transformed into this heroic like achievement, and then the very end credits, which no one watches. Can I swear on this?
Oh, go ahead, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I like Netflix, you're great, but fuck you for like always never letting me watch the credits and having to jump off my sofa to capture them. But otherwise, Netflix are great. Go Netflix.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. And so there's a theme. That theme comes back at the end in a kind of like the modern version of what it's going to be. And then also just the orchestra, like how I did, how I approached the orchestration. There's like bits where it's very symphonic, but bits where we land on the planet. I wanted to capture the kind of more unusual array of things like marimbas and very high strings, and sort of muted brass and woodwind. There's not a lot of woodwind writing these days, so it was nice to grasp that and put that into the score. I mean, these are kind of slightly boring things that only film music geeks are going to go, oh yeah, you're right, there's not a lot of woodwind in film scores these days. But there's not a lot of woodwind in film scores at the moment. It's all brass strings and drums that go jum 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 jum. Mm-hmm. He says, as I'm currently writing a score with brass and strings and jum 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 jum.
You mentioned the fact that this was kind of like two scores in one, and you do have the near future dystopian kind of musical aspect that you have to capture as well. Can you talk about how you scored that, and also how you make these two things feel like they go together, so that they don't feel like they're in two different episodes?
Yeah, I mean, that was really hard as well, like because we had the near future, which is this much more electronic score, and as the two worlds collide, we have Daly's kind of perfect world as he sees it of Space Fleet, and we have Lynette's world, Lynette Cole, who's the main protagonist, and she takes over. She comes into that world and tries to subvert it, and so we sort of have her, which is the near future, and as the film progresses, those sort of two worlds come closer and closer together, and it's trying to find devices to jump between them, and also it's like just looking at it from a story point of view, you're like, who's in control here? Is Daly in control? Because if Daly's in control, it needs to be generally very orchestral if he's in Space Fleet world. If Lynette's taking over, we can start bringing in this other score. And so it was very complicated to try and find a way that kept the authenticity of the Space Fleet world, and allowed this modern world to encroach on it. But it seemed to work. So yeah, we managed to get there. But it was tricksy, and there was lots of debate over certain scenes.
Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of debate? Well, I mean, when you have that kind of problem figuring something out, how do you? Is it just through trial and error, or conversations with the director? How do you figure out the best approach to solve these kinds of problems?
You'd kind of go, you sort of have to step back a bit and look at it as sometimes you have to step back and look as the viewer and go, okay, what's going to work here? What we try to say about Daly at this point. There was a bit earlier where we'd made Daly more heroic, because the first time you see the film, you don't know he's a baddie necessarily. That's the interesting thing about him. You sympathize with him, and I'd made it so you sympathize with him more at the beginning,
right?
But Charlie wanted to swap it so he was more, you knew he was a villain quicker. And in retrospect, it's probably a good note. So you score things and you go back and re-score them. But most of it was actually it was tricksy for me. But in terms of like the director, Toby Haynes, who's brilliant, like fantastic director, and Charlie and Annabelle, who are both great. It was actually pretty straightforward. And also, we didn't have enough time for it not to be straightforward because there was so much music to write. I mean, it's like just it's basically doing a feature film. It's like an hour and a half, and it's got a lot of music in it.
Was there a specific?
Right. That music's tricksy to write as well.
Right. Was there a specific moment or scene that you could point to as being particularly difficult for you to score?
I don't know what the hardest one was. I mean, the things you end up having the biggest problems on, the most inconsequential, I find on every project I do, you have like these massive pieces. You're like, that's gonna be a nightmare, and they're like, that's great, or do it again. Right, it's great. And then you get stuck on these like tiny bits, which are like 30 seconds of a guy going out through a door. And that becomes the thing everyone gets stuck on. The thing we got most stuck on was a very like third or fourth music cue, which is just when Daly enters and strangles Jesse, Captain Daly. No, Walton, character called Walton. He strangles Walton. And that scene was just, that was a tricksy scene, but you watch it, you just forget about it in 2 seconds. But whereas like the big battles at the end and the big celebration, that weirdly just came together, like, quite seamlessly. I think the other thing is when you've got a great director or a great episode or well-written episode and everything's already great, it's a lot easier to write music because it does make your job easier because you've got something that's working to respond to.
You mentioned the fact you were juggling multiple projects when you took this on. I think I counted about 5 credits that you had in the year 2017. So you were busy at that time. How do you balance your time between projects, or how do you, move from one thing to the next in order to give each one its equal share of time?
I mean, I try not to do loads of things on top of each other, and like I kind of work on my own. This is not a big factory. There's no assistants running around. So I try not to get in that position, to be honest. And I think I just got lucky in that I've done a lot of work on Aaron's film, Molly's Game, and they were already in quite a good place because I try and, rather than do like 20 film, like a zillion films and just say yes to everything, I try and just do a few and get really involved. So with Sorkin, it was like I'd already done a lot of work on that project, and then Ridley's film they were still shooting, so I was kind of writing stuff, but it wasn't in the crunch time. So it was more like I had a lot of space around me. It's just that I like to get really involved with the project rather than just turn up and like, here's your score, boom, I'm out of here. Because basically I like writing stuff that doesn't work, or not doesn't work, but I like being able to like try lots of ideas out, and we can sort of work out what's going to work for the film.
Well, what do you look for in the projects that you're going to take on?
Just, are they good? Like, do you respond to the project? Does it touch you? Is there, is there integrity behind it? And I think whenever you're working on a project, like when it's good, and it can be like a gazillion-dollar film, or it can be like a £2 indie film. Maybe not £2, but as long as there's someone behind it passionate about what they're doing, then instantly I'm way more attracted to it. Like last year, I did a film for a friend who was making a movie for literally almost nothing. He'd kickstarted it, and he's a great director. This guy called Barnaby Southcombe. He made a film called I, Anna, which no one's really seen, but it's really good. He's making a super low budget indie movie, which I agreed to do for, this is not my normal rate, by the way, but £1 and a pint. And I have a contract. I have a contract that says £1 and a pint. Because again, he was a great, you know, he's doing something, he's doing it like because he wants to make a movie, he's making a great movie. And I knew that I could bring something to it. And yeah, that was just as fun to work on as it is, you know, the Spider-Man movie that I'm doing at the moment. So,
well, Daniel Pemberton, thank you so much, and congratulations on your Emmy nomination. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, before I go, I can give you the little fifth thing, just as a kind of.
Oh, good.
I can't remember how the. Oh, I can't because I turned the volume down, and you get an echo by the way. So hang on, here you go. You get an echo. Where is it? Hang on, here we go.
Yeah.
That's not the theme though. That's just the fifth. Anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.